Thank you once again. So, getting out of the crisis is a very practical question. It's about what you do next. Neoliberals have always had a crazy strategy, but now their tactics are not working either. This gives us a responsibility. We have to be clear about what has to be done next. I will outline some practical steps to get Russia out of crisis. To be more precise, to keep it out of crisis, and that means to launch it on a sustainable path of economic growth and development. Maybe it would be a good idea to translate what is in this slide. So could you just translate these four?
Итак,
These are four regions of the world.
Индия 9,4 в 2010, а затем снижение до 5,3 в 2012.
There are two sources of difference in the growth. Three sources of difference. First is the money policy. Second is whether there is a state stimulus. Third is whether the state invests, an investment stimulus. These figures illustrate a simple economic law of the crisis. Many other figures illustrate the same principle, but these make it most clear. This is not a law of equilibrium economy. This is not about an ideal perfect economy. This is about the real economy of the world we live in, and it is proved in the best scientific way by facts. The law is as follows. If the state does not act in a crisis, or if it cuts spending, the economy declines. If the state acts by stimulating consumer demand, the economy does not decline but grows slowly. If the state controls capital, the country grows faster, particularly if it controls the banking system. This describes India. If the state invests in production, the economy expands extremely fast. This is why it is possible to get out of the crisis. To understand why that happens, what I want to now look at is the cause of the crisis. And I will say this, that the pundits, by pundits I mean academic experts, economic advisors, bankers, they will do anything to avoid recognizing that the state makes the economy grow. They will do even more to prove that capitalism does not make it fail. Clinton won his second election on a simple slogan. He said, "It's the economy, dummy." The way out of the crisis is two simple slogans. It's capitalism, dummy, and it's the state, dummy. We are now in the 7th year of this crisis. Now this proves it's a very different one from the last 4 or 5 crises. It's not a normal business cycle. In fact, I will illustrate this in relation to the US. The graph you have here, the red line, all these show different depressions measured from their start. So the red line is the present depression. So it's the percent change from the start of the cycle to the present situation in real GDP. So real GDP has not yet recovered to what it was at the beginning of the crisis. If you look at all previous crises, they had already recovered by this time and were beginning to grow. This is part of a long-term decline in the US economy. Now, I don't have time to give you all the figures and explain them now. I have put all of these in a paper which is going to be on the website of the Post-Globalization Initiative and will be translated into Russian there. So now I will just summarize. Firstly, growth in the USA has been declining systematically since the 1970s. We only have to agree 3 things: that the crisis is deep, and structural, that it is the result of long-term factors, and that these factors are inherent in the nature of capitalism. So how do you get out of it? You get out of this through, this is an exceptional crisis, and therefore you need exceptional measures to get out of it. That's why you need massive state intervention. I'm going to prove this by showing you how the United States got out of the last such crisis in 1929. In this graph, the red line is unemployment and the blue line is annual GDP growth. So unemployment basically did not disappear until 1944. The New Deal was not big enough. Same goes for GDP. Now let's look at what happened. Here, the blue line shows state spending. The red line shows private investment. The US got out of the last crisis in 1942, when the state spent 48% of GDP on the war. We don't want to get out of this crisis by going to war. So we have to find something which means spending on the same scale, much, much more than America, for example. Much closer to what China spends, but for peaceful purposes. Because this crisis is a crisis of investment. The red block shows fixed investment. So it has fallen faster in Europe than any other component of GDP between 2008 and 2012. In the US, in fact, with the investment was the only component of GDP that fell. There are two very interesting very important and interesting discussions that have gone on in neoclassical economics, which every expert in Russia should be referred to. I'm sorry, I forgot one graph. This shows investment by three countries, the USA, India and China. This shows that investment is the cause of growth. It's absolutely clear. Okay, the two discussions are first. There is a very well-known paper by two economists called Rogoff and Reinhardt, and this shows, or it tries to show, that if you go into debt, you don't grow. They showed that if you are a debt above 90% of GDP, you can expect your growth rate to be minus 0.1%. This paper was very widely quoted by neoliberals. I have no doubt it is widely cited by Russian experts. It used to be used by the leader of the House in the US to explain why Republicans would not allow Obama to use a fiscal stimulus. Recently, a mistake was discovered in this paper by an undergraduate student. They missed a number out of their spreadsheet. In fact, the growth figure was 2.2%. In 2009, 60% of the world countries were growing more slowly than 2.2%. If only they had gone into debt, they would have grown. The other discussion concerns what is called the multiplier that is used by the IMF. The multiplier tells you how much growth you get in your economy for each dollar or ruble that the state invests. It is a golden rule of economics that the multiplier cannot be greater than 1. Because if the multiplier is greater than 1, you will get more money than you spend if you invest. They have now discovered that the multiplier, instead of being less than 1 for state investment, is 1.7. This is important because it means even economists who previously were neoliberals to the core are beginning to question the wisdom of what they're saying. They're beginning to discover this is not Marxists and Keynesians. This is the IMF. The IMF is now criticising Britain because the government does not spend enough. So the problem with Russia is not that it is a backward country, is that it has backward neoliberals. Now, I don't have time to discuss a number of things that are quite important about what you should invest in, about why the BRICS are important, but Radek will be dealing with that later. So I just want to make one proposal in conclusion. This arises from the experience I had in Argentina, where I was in Argentina during the period of the debt crisis. Argentina was the first country to default on its debt, and everybody said it wouldn't work. It is now one of the faster growing countries in Latin America. This was not just because of the default. It would be very irresponsible for me to say, all you have to do is default and you will grow. That's not true. There was a second component of Argentine success. This was a plan called the Plan Phoenix. This plan showed in detail how to make the Argentine economy grow again by using the state for what Radek has called combined development. And this plan was a detailed set of measures. They had to get rid of the debt first, so they would be allowed to do it without the IMF telling them they couldn't. Many important elements of the plan have not been carried out, and that is why there are still some problems in Argentina. But many have. That plan was prepared by a body just like this. And the plan was prepared before the debt crisis, not after. So that when the devaluation of the peso occurred, the opposition was ready with the way to get out of the crisis. I think that may be what's needed here. Very last sentence. This was done by an alliance of academics, of trade unionists, especially from the independent trade unions, of social movements, and simply of concerned citizens. They worked together simply to say, if we didn't have to do neoliberalism, what could we do to unleash the country's potential? And it was having that plan ready which was a crucial element in Argentina's success. And in fact, it was a crucial element in getting out of the debt, because it gave the political leaders of the country the courage to understand that there was an alternative way forward. Thank you very much.
Спасибо.